The autumn wind carried the scent of burning leaves that evening, soft and nostalgic like a memory I couldn't quite touch but couldn't forget either. The town I lived in was small, quiet, and painted in shades of gold and brown. Streets lined with maple trees, children running with scarves fluttering behind them, and the faint hum of life that never really changed. Sometimes I wondered if I'd become one of those trees rooted in place. Watching seasons pass but never truly moving. My name is Emma. I'm 27 years old. A writer by profession, though most days it feels more like a battle than a passion. I live alone in a little apartment on the edge of town, where the nights are longer than they should be and silence feels heavier than words. My work mostly revolves around writing short stories about love, heartbreak, and the thousand tiny moments that make up a life. I write about pain as if I've lived it all, and maybe, in some quiet, invisible way, I have. That evening, I was getting ready to attend my cousin Daniel's engagement announcement. Daniel was the kind of person everyone adored. The kind-hearted, endlessly optimistic golden boy of the family. If life were a story, he would be the protagonist, the one everyone roots for. I had always admired him, even envied him at times. He seemed to have found the kind of happiness I wrote about but never experienced. When I reached the family house, laughter echoed from the garden. Warm lights hung between trees, and people stood around in small groups, talking, smiling, living. My aunt saw me first and waved, her face glowing with excitement. "Emma, you finally made it. Come, you have to meet everyone." I smiled, or at least tried to. Family gatherings always made me feel both full and empty. Full of warmth, yet empty of belonging. I watched Daniel stand at the center, his arm wrapped around the woman who would soon become his wife. Everyone was applauding, glasses raised high, a moment that was supposed to be perfect. I joined in the clapping, but my hands felt heavy. Daniel looked happier than I'd ever seen him. He caught my eye and smiled that same boyish smile he'd had since we were kids. "Emma," he called, motioning me over. "You're here. I was just telling everyone that you'll probably end up writing about us in one of your books." I laughed softly. "Only if you promise me a good ending." He grinned, and his fiancée, still a mystery to me, turned her face slightly, as if shy to meet my gaze. I couldn't see her clearly yet. The lights around her seemed to blur everything into a soft haze. For a moment, I wondered what her name was, what kind of person could make someone like Daniel look that happy. Later, as I sat quietly in a corner with my cup of tea, my aunt joined me. "You're next, Emma," she teased. "We need to see you smiling like that one day." I smiled faintly. Love had always knocked, I said, almost to myself, but never stayed. She chuckled, not really catching the weight of what I'd said. But I meant every word. Relationships had always come into my life like seasons, beautiful, unpredictable, but never lasting. I'd loved deeply once, and it had left me scarred in a way no story could fully capture. Maybe that's why I wrote so much, because writing was the only way to keep the pain from consuming me. As the evening went on, the sky turned from orange to deep blue. I wandered to the edge of the garden, away from the noise. The sound of laughter faded behind me, replaced by the rustling of leaves. I looked up at the stars, feeling the familiar ache of solitude settle in my chest. I thought about my stories, my characters, how easily I gave them happy endings, even when I didn't believe in them myself. Maybe I wrote what I couldn't live. And then, out of nowhere, I heard her voice. Soft, clear, like a note in the silence. "You must be Emma." I turned around, and there she was, Daniel's fiancée, the woman who had been standing beside him all evening. She stepped closer, her smile kind, her presence strangely calming. "I've heard so much about you," she said. "Daniel says you're the best storyteller in the family." I nodded, returning her smile. "That's kind of him." She extended her hand. I'm Lucy. Her name hung in the air for a moment, like a word that would later mean too much. I didn't know it then, but that single introduction would rewrite everything I believed about love, loyalty, and the limits of the heart. For now, it was just a meeting, a polite exchange between two women under autumn lights. But deep down, somewhere in the quietest corner of my soul, something stirred. Something that whispered that my world was about to change. I didn't know if it was fate or something far more dangerous. But I knew this. After that night, nothing in my life would ever be the same again. Lucy's voice lingered in my mind long after that night. There was something about her tone, soft, deliberate, almost musical, that felt like it belonged to another time. I remember the way she stood, her posture composed yet gentle, as though she was afraid to take up too much space. Her eyes were calm, the kind that didn't just look at you, but looked through you, as if searching for the parts you hid from the world. In the days that followed, her name came up often in family conversations. Everyone adored her. Lucy's so kind, my aunt said. She's the perfect match for Daniel. My mother mentioned her with the kind of admiration she rarely gave anyone. She reminds me of you, Emma, she said once, though I wasn't sure if that was a compliment or a quiet warning. The next time I saw Lucy was at a family lunch a few weeks later. The sun was high that afternoon, light spilling through the large windows of the dining room. Everyone was laughing, passing plates across the table, conversations overlapping, yet for me it all felt strangely distant. Until she walked in. Lucy wore a soft beige dress, simple but graceful. Her hair fell in loose waves around her shoulders, and she carried herself with an elegance that wasn't deliberate, it just was. But what caught me most was the faint sadness in her smile. She looked happy, yes, but it was the kind of happiness that felt like effort. She noticed me almost immediately and came over, holding a bowl of salad she was helping to serve. Hey, writer girl, she said teasingly, remembering my name from the engagement night. Would you mind giving me a hand? Her voice had that gentle playfulness that disarms you without warning. I nodded, taking the bowl from her. Of course, I replied. It's the least I can do after all the praise I've heard about your cooking. She laughed softly. Don't believe everything Daniel says. He's trying to make me sound perfect before the wedding. Our hands brushed as she passed me the serving spoon, a small, accidental touch that somehow lingered longer than it should have. I told myself it was nothing but a small, inexplicable unease started to build in my chest. Throughout the meal, I found myself watching her without meaning to. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she listened, how she looked at people when they spoke, as if every word mattered. It was strange how she seemed both present and far away, as though a part of her lived in another world no one else could see. Later, after everyone had eaten, Lucy wandered into the living room where my books and drafts were stacked on the coffee table. I saw her pick one up, a short story collection I'd self-published years ago. She turned a few pages, then looked up when she noticed me standing by the doorway. This one's yours, isn't it? She asked. I nodded. Yeah, it's nothing big. Just a small project I worked on a while ago. She smiled faintly, tracing her fingers over the cover. You write about pain as if you've lived 1,000 lives. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Most people read my work for the romance or the drama, but she had gone straight to the ache beneath the words, the part no one ever mentioned. Maybe I just noticed things too deeply. I finally replied. Or maybe you feel things too deeply, she said softly. And there was a flicker in her eyes, recognition, maybe, or longing. Something wordless passed between us, something neither of us dared to name. The conversation drifted after that, but I kept thinking about what she said. We talked about books, about music, about how she had studied psychology before deciding to work in design. She told me she loved observing people, not what they said, but what they didn't. And I remember thinking, then what do you see when you look at me? The rest of the family was outside by the time we realized how long we'd been talking. The light from the window had dimmed, painting the room in shades of amber. She stood by the window, her profile glowing in the fading light, and said, almost to herself, "Sometimes I feel like I'm living someone else's life." Her voice trembled slightly, and I saw the same sadness again, that quiet ache behind her smile. I wanted to ask her what she meant, but before I could, Daniel called her name from outside. She turned, forced a smile, and walked away, leaving her warmth and her sadness behind. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't stop replaying the day. The sound of her laughter, the look in her eyes when she spoke about pain, the way she seemed to understand me without needing to ask a single question. It was unsettling, that kind of understanding. Why did I feel this comfort around her? A woman I barely knew, who was soon to marry my cousin. Why did her voice echo in my mind like a song I couldn't stop humming? I tried to reason with myself. It was admiration, empathy, nothing more. But deep down, I knew it was something else. Something I didn't yet have the courage to name. As I closed my eyes, I remembered how she had looked at me, not just looked, but seen. And in that quiet darkness, I realized how long it had been since anyone had. I told myself it was nothing, just a passing moment. But somewhere deep within, I could already feel the ground shifting, the first crack in a wall I thought would never break. Lucy started visiting more often after that afternoon. At first, it was harmless, or at least that's what I told myself. She would call and say, "Emma, I need help picking out a color palette for the wedding cards," or, "I want your opinion on the table settings. You have such a calm taste." I'd laugh, pretending to believe her, but part of me knew she didn't come for opinions. She came for quiet, for the kind of silence that didn't demand anything from her. My apartment became her refuge. She'd bring her laptop, a cup of coffee for both of us, and stay for hours. We'd sit at the table, surrounded by the soft hum of rain or the low sound of music, talking about things that had nothing to do with the wedding. She told me about her childhood, about growing up in a family that measured love by obedience, how her father never asked what she wanted, only what she could give, how she learned to smile even when she wanted to scream. You ever feel like your whole life's already been decided for you? She asked one day, her voice low, her eyes tracing the rim of her cup. "Every day," I said. She looked up then, studying me for a moment before whispering, "I knew you'd understand." That simple sentence, "I knew you'd understand," settled deep inside me. It shouldn't have meant so much, but it did. As weeks went by, her visits grew longer, her calls more frequent. Sometimes she'd message me late at night when the rest of the world was asleep. "Can't sleep? Everything feels heavy tonight," and I'd reply, "Tell me what's on your mind." Sometimes she'd talk about the wedding. Sometimes she wouldn't say anything at all. Just a message like, "I wish you were here." Those words became dangerous in their softness. They carried weight. I told myself to stop replying so quickly, to set boundaries, but I never did. I couldn't. There was something magnetic about her, something fragile and beautiful I wanted to protect. Even if it destroyed me. One evening, rain began to fall just as she arrived. She was soaked from the walk from her car, her hair clinging to her skin. I handed her a towel and she laughed, shaking her head like a child caught in a storm. "I didn't plan to stay long," she said, "but I didn't want to be alone." We sat by the window, the sound of the rain filling the silence between us. A single candle flickered on the table, its light painting gold on her face. She stared out into the night for a long time before finally speaking. "Can I tell you something?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Of course." She hesitated. "I don't love Daniel." The room went still. The rain seemed to pause. She looked down at her hands, twisting the ring on her finger. I thought I did once. Or maybe I just wanted to. Everyone kept telling me how lucky I was, how perfect he is. And he is perfect, kind, generous, patient. But when he talks about our future, I feel trapped. I didn't know what to say. Every word she spoke was like a secret I wasn't supposed to hear. Then why marry him? I finally whispered Dot. She gave a sad smile. Because sometimes love isn't what matters most. Sometimes it's about keeping peace, my family. They wouldn't understand if I called it off. They'd say I'm ungrateful, unstable. I can't disappoint them again. She turned toward me then, and her eyes glistened in the candlelight. Do you think that makes me weak? I shook my head. No, I think it makes you human. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The candle flickered, the rain whispered against the glass. And the space between us felt charged with something unspoken, something we both knew but didn't dare name. When she finally stood to leave, I felt an ache I couldn't explain. Watching her walk away through the rain, her figure fading into the mist, I wanted to call out, to tell her not to go. But I didn't that night as I lay in bed. Her words echoed in my head. I don't love Daniel. Dot. It should have been a relief to know that her heart was still hers to give, but instead, it tore me apart. The next few days were a blur of mixed emotions. Guilt gnawed at me, but so did longing. I found myself checking my phone too often, waiting for her messages. Are you awake? It's raining again. I can't stop thinking about our talk. Each message pulled me closer to something I knew I shouldn't want. Our friendship, if that's what it still was, became an emotional tether. She began to share every small fear, every doubt, every ache. I became her safe place, and in doing so, I lost my own footing. When she laughed, I felt warmth. When she cried, I felt her pain as if it were mine. I told myself this connection was pure, just two souls understanding each other. But deep down, I knew purity had already left the room. One evening, as I sat alone at my desk, my phone buzzed again. A message from her. I wish I could be where you are right now. I stared at it for a long time. I could almost hear her voice saying it, almost see her face lit by the glow of her screen. I wanted to reply, then come. But I did in single quotes T. Dot instead. I placed my phone face down on the table and leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. My heart felt too full, too heavy, too fragile. Dot in that moment. I realized something terrifying, that love doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it slips quietly through the cracks of friendship, disguised as comfort, as understanding, until it becomes something you can't name but also can't let go of. Dot. And for the first time in years, I wasn't just writing about heartbreak, I was living it. The announcement came on a Sunday morning. My mother called, her voice cheerful, almost glowing through the phone. Emma, it's finally official. Daniel and Lucy's wedding day is set for next month. I froze. Her words echoed in my mind like a slow-moving storm. Daniel and Lucy's wedding. I should have said something, congratulations, maybe, but no sound came out. I just stared at the window at the soft drizzle outside and listened as she went on about the arrangements, the guest list, the excitement. When the call ended, I sat in silence for a long time. My tea had gone cold, my fingers trembled slightly. The truth settled inside me like a stone-heavy, cold, and impossible to move. Lucy was going to marry Daniel. The woman who told me she felt trapped was going to say, I do. The days that followed were unbearable. I stopped attending family dinners. Every gathering meant hearing her name, hearing about floral decorations, venues, dresses, and love that wasn't real. I couldn't pretend anymore. So I did what I always did best, disappeared quietly. I told everyone I was busy with a new writing project. I shut off my phone at night. I wrote, deleted, and rewrote. trying to pour the ache out through words that refuse to make sense. But pain has a way of finding you. Even when you hide Dot, it was past midnight when I heard the knock on my door. Soft at first, then insistent. I wasn't expecting anyone, but something in my chest knew who it was. Before I even opened the door, Dot Lucy stood there, rain-soaked, trembling, her eyes red from crying. "I shouldn't be here," she whispered, but I didn't know where else to go. She looked lost, fragile, as if one wrong word would break her completely. I stepped aside silently and she walked in, her wet shoes leaving faint marks on the wooden floor. "I heard about the date," I said quietly. "Congratulations." She flinched as if the word itself hurt. "Don't," she said, her voice breaking. "Don't say that." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the rain tapping against the window. The candle flickering on the table between us. Dot, finally, she whispered, "Why can't I stop thinking about you?" My heart clenched. I wanted to tell her to stop, to leave, to not make this harder. But instead, I just stared at her trembling lips, her tear-streaked face, the pain she wore so openly. "Lucy," I said softly, but she stepped closer, shaking her head. I tried to move on. "I told myself it was just confusion, that I cared about you because you listened. But it's more than that. It's always been more than that." Her hands found mine, cold and shaking. "I don't know what's happening to me. I'm supposed to love him, Emma. Everyone says he's perfect, but when I close my eyes, it's you I see. It's your voice I hear." I felt the tears before I even realized I was crying. "Don't do this," I whispered. "Please, but it's the truth." The candle between us flickered wildly, throwing shadows across her face. The world outside was drenched in darkness, and inside that small room, time seemed to stop. Dot, we stood there, hands intertwined, breathing the same trembling air. There were no words left, only silence thick, heavy, and filled with everything we couldn't say. I wanted to hold her, to tell her to stay. But I also knew that love, in this form, was destruction, after what felt like an eternity. I finally spoke, my voice barely a whisper. "You were never mine to love, Lucy." She closed her eyes, and for a second, her face broke completely, like a fragile glass shattering under too much pressure. A sob escaped her, soft but deep, the kind that comes from the soul. She pulled her hands away, wiping her tears quickly. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't come here to make it harder." "You already did," I murmured. Dot, she nodded slowly, as if she understood that this moment would haunt both of us forever. Then, without another word, she turned toward the door. When she left, the room felt emptier than ever. The door clicked shut, and I sank to the floor, shaking. My breath came in sharp, uneven gasps. The candle burned low until it finally died, leaving me in darkness. That night, I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I sat by the window, staring into the rain, watching her words replay in my mind. "Why can't I stop thinking about you?" Days turned into weeks, and before I knew it, the wedding day arrived. I didn't go. I couldn't. My family thought I was traveling for work. But in truth, I stayed home, sitting in the same chair by the window, imagining her in white smiling, surrounded by people who believed it was a perfect day. Somewhere in that ceremony, I hoped she felt my absence. Maybe she looked around once. Maybe she thought of me for a fleeting second before returning to the script of her life. That night, I opened my phone. Dozens of photos filled the family group chat, Lucy and Daniel smiling, hands entwined, garlands of flowers framing their faces. Everyone had written beautiful couple, match made in heaven. I stared at the images until they blurred. My chest tightened, my throat burned. I wanted to be happy for them, but I couldn't even breathe. Finally, I opened our old chat. Hundreds of messages. Words that once meant everything. "You make me feel seen. Thank you for listening. Wish I could be where you are right now. I scrolled through them all one last time, then pressed delete conversation dot. The confirmation message popped up on the screen. Are you sure you want to delete this? My finger hovered over the button for a long time before I finally tapped yes dot, and just like that, she was gone. The silence afterward was deafening. I sat there for hours, staring at the dark screen, tears streaming down my face. My body felt hollow, my heart exhausted. That night, I realized something cruel about love. It doesn't always leave when you ask it to. Sometimes it stays like a ghost, haunting every corner of your heart, whispering the name of the one you were never meant to keep. It had been nearly 6 months since the wedding. 6 months since I'd last seen her face, last heard her voice trembling on my doorstep. I had built my life around silence since then, the kind that hums softly in empty rooms and fills every heartbeat with what-ifs. I thought I had finally made peace with it. Until one morning, I found a letter in my mailbox. It was unmarked, simple, folded with the kind of care only love or regret can give. My name was written on the front in her handwriting, the same handwriting that once filled my notebooks with hurried thoughts and half-finished poems. I held it for a long time before opening it. My fingers trembled as I unfolded the paper. Emma, I don't know how to begin this without breaking all over again, but I need to say what I never could. I never stopped loving you. Not for a day. Not even after the wedding. Not even when I smiled for photographs I didn't want to take. I told myself I could build a life around duty, that maybe love wasn't everything. But I was wrong. Every morning, I woke up beside someone kind, decent, and safe, and felt like a liar. I ended my marriage, Emma. I couldn't keep pretending. He didn't deserve a half-hearted love, and you didn't deserve my silence. If you can meet me one last time, not to start over, but to end what we never could. Always, Lucy. My chest ached as I read it again and again. Every line felt like reopening a wound that never truly healed. Part of me wanted to throw it away, to stay numb, to not feel everything again. But another part, the part that still dreamed of her laugh, her touch, needed to see her one last time. We met on a quiet afternoon in the same park where we used to sit and talk about books, dreams, and impossible futures. The air was heavy with the smell of rain. The sky a dull gray curtain that hung low and thick. Lucy was already there, sitting on a bench under a half-bare tree. She looked different, thinner, quieter, but her eyes were still the same. The kind of eyes that once made me believe the world wasn't so cruel after all. When she saw me, she smiled faintly. You came? I wasn't sure if I should, I said softly. I wasn't sure if you would. She replied. Silence, the kind that stretched between us like a fragile thread. Finally, she spoke. I told him everything. I looked up. Everything? She nodded. About us. About how I fell in love with you before I even realized it. He just looked at me for a long time and said, I think you've already left me long ago. Her voice broke, but she continued. I didn't want to hurt him, but I was already living a lie. And I couldn't carry it anymore. I swallowed hard. Lucy, you didn't have to do that for me. She shook her head. I didn't do it for you. I did it for myself. I needed to stop pretending that what I felt for you was something I could erase. Rain began to fall softly, speckling her hair and shoulders. She didn't move. Neither did I. I kept waiting for time to make me forget you, she whispered. But every month that passed, I missed you more. And that terrified me. Her eyes glistened as she reached for my hand. You taught me what real love feels like, even if it destroyed us. Her words shattered something inside me. Tears welled up before I could stop them. Then why does it hurt so much? Because it was real, she said simply. And real things always hurt when they end. We sat there, hand in hand, both trembling. There were no declarations, no promises, just two souls who had loved too deeply and too wrong. The rain grew heavier, but neither of us cared. It felt like the sky was crying for us. "I don't want to lose you," I whispered. "You already did," she said softly. "But that doesn't mean it wasn't love." The tears came freely then. She reached up and brushed one from my cheek, her touch warm against my cold skin. "We were never meant to have a forever, Emma," she said. "But we had something, and that's more than most people ever get." I wanted to hold her, to ask her to stay, but I knew that would only drag us back into the same ache. This wasn't a reunion. It was goodbye, the kind that comes too late but still matters. She stood slowly, her hand slipping from mine. "Take care of yourself," she said. "Please." I nodded, unable to speak thought as she began to walk away. The rain poured harder, blurring her figure into a silhouette. I watched her go, her steps slow but certain. Her coat darkened my rain. She didn't look back, and I didn't call out, because love, I realized, isn't always about holding on. Sometimes it's about letting go before it destroys you completely. When she finally disappeared into the curtain of rain, I sat back down on the bench, soaked and shivering, but strangely at peace. That letter. Her words, her tears, they didn't heal me, but they gave my pain a purpose. Some love stories aren't meant to be lived. They're meant to be remembered, whispered softly in the corners of your heart, revisited in dreams, and felt in the silence between breaths. Lucy had been both my beginning and my undoing, and as I watched the raindrops ripple across the puddles, I whispered into the wind, "Goodbye, Lucy." The sky answered with thunder, soft and distant, like the echo of a love that had finally found its end. I left home 3 weeks after seeing Lucy for the last time. Thought it wasn't a planned escape, just a quiet leaving. One suitcase, a few books, my typewriter, and the ache I hadn't learned to put down yet. The train ride out of that small town felt endless. Every mile away from her felt both like freedom and loss. Outside the window, the fields blurred into soft shades of gold and gray. It was autumn again, the same season when she had first walked into my life. Funny how endings often mirror beginnings. I rented a small cottage by the sea. It was nothing like the home I had before, smaller, quieter, but it had windows that faced the horizon. I'd spend mornings watching the waves break against the rocks. The kind of sound that makes you realize how small your heartbreak is compared to the world's endless rhythm. For weeks, I couldn't write a single word. Every sentence started to sound like her name. Every thought circled back to her voice, her smile, that final moment in the rain. But slowly, the silence became less cruel. One evening, as the sun was dipping low, painting the ocean in muted orange, I opened my notebook again. The words came out unplanned, unpolished, like a confession that had been waiting inside me. The woman who loved me when she wasn't supposed to. That became the title of the story that changed everything for me. It wasn't about right or wrong. It wasn't about blame. It was simply about feeling how love can find you in the most unexpected person, how it can lift you and break you at the same time. Writing it felt like breathing after drowning. I poured into it everything I hadn't said, every unsent message, every memory that had haunted me. For the first time in months, my tears felt cleansing instead of cruel. There were days when I missed her so fiercely that it physically hurt. The smell of rain, the color of her favorite scarf, even the way the sea wind tangled my hair, everything reminded me of her. But with time, those reminders softened. They stopped being wounds and became memories. I began to forgive her, not because she deserved it, but because I deserved peace, and I forgave myself too. For loving her, for not stopping myself sooner, for being human in a world that doesn't make space for love, that doesn't follow rules. Sometimes I'd walk along the shoreline and imagine her somewhere far away, happy, maybe even free. I didn't need to know where she was anymore. Loving her had taught me that closure isn't about getting answers. It's about accepting the silence that follows them. The waves became my companions. They didn't ask questions or offer advice. They just came and went, carrying bits of pain with every tide. I think healing works the same way, slow, repetitive, almost invisible until one day you realize the ache isn't as sharp as it used to be. Months later, my story was published in a small literary magazine. Readers wrote letters, strangers who said it made them cry, who said it reminded them of a love they'd lost or never confessed. I smiled reading their words. Maybe that was Lucy's gift to me. She gave me a story that wasn't just mine anymore. I still keep her letter in a box, folded neatly between pages of an old journal. I don't open it often. Just knowing it's there, that she once loved me enough to write those words, is enough. Now, when I sit by the sea with my notebook, I no longer feel haunted. The sadness is still there, but it's softer, like an old song you hum under your breath without realizing it. If I were to speak to her now, I think I'd say this: I don't hate you for choosing him. I don't hate myself for loving you. Some stories aren't meant to be happy, they're meant to be felt. Love doesn't always need to end with forever. Sometimes it ends with understanding, that brief, quiet acceptance that even pain can be beautiful when it's honest. And maybe that's what our story really was. A reminder that love, no matter how forbidden, leaves behind something sacred, the courage to feel deeply and the strength to let go gently. As the sun sets each evening and the world folds into the hush of twilight, I whisper a small thank you to her memory. Not for what we had, but for what I became because of it. And in that quiet peace, where love and loss finally stop fighting, I realize I am no longer broken, just changed.